Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to my kitchen. We are at the fridge. UFC 295 is almost upon us. I want to wish everybody a fantastic Monday. Here we are. So we have a lot of fights to look forward to the rest of the year, and coming off of a interesting fight card at UFC Sao Paulo, where who would have thunk it? Jailton Almeida goes the distance with Derek Lewis in a fight that was shocking, to say the least. You had Jailton Almeida accruing over 21 minutes of control time. I believe he had almost 20 minutes of time in the full mount and was unable to submit Derek Lewis, wasn't able to TKO Derek Lewis. And here we are. Congrats to those who were able to cash on those Jailton Almeida by decision tickets. Very impressive. That was probably the most least likely outcome out of all outcomes. You look at implied probability and how that played out. That was incredible. And that fight, I believe, fight doesn't go the distance, was sitting at minus 10,000 at one point. Incredible. So UFC Sao Paulo, excellent card to a certain degree. We saw some fighters come out and shine and others falter under the bright lights. We'll walk our way up and down that card. By the way, if you'd like, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section. I'll address them on air as well. This is a Q&A type session. It's a casual approach here where we are live, and we are going to talk about a number of UFC 295 matchups. We'll also take a look back at UFC Sao Paulo. It's a little bit of a different approach here, but the premise of this show is coming to the fridge. You know, Mike's MMA Picks here, what we do. If there's a firecracker of a matchup, it typically ends up on my fridge. That is how we roll. So let's take a brief look at some of the fights that popped out to us on the UFC Sao Paulo card. We'll just take a brief look back. Mark Diakese, very impressive performance, got his wrestling going, came out the other side victorious. We knew Fernandez, that was his kryptonite there, especially going deep into fights, was running into some difficulty on the mat. The second fight of the night, you saw Eduardo Mora, who realistically, that fight shouldn't have been sanctioned. Mora defeating Conejo Ruiz, where she looked legitimately a full weight class larger than her opponent. And Mora really put it on all gas, no brakes in that fight. And you knew that the finish was likely coming there, and it did. Now, what really blew my mind was Ruiz went to social media and posted that she earned herself another UFC contract based off that performance. I know, granted, she got the 30% of Mora's purse, but was that enough? She took a beating, and now she gets a new contract. And Ruiz, I'll be honest, she doesn't seem like a UFC caliber fighter. Then the next fight of the night, you saw Denise Gomes falter under the bright lights. Angela Hill teaching Denise Gomes a vet lesson. Very impressed by Angela Hill, even at 38 years of age, to come across the finish line victorious. And that second and third round, that was all Angela Hill. And we'll talk about another 38-year-old fighter in a few minutes, Nicholas Dalby, who has been turning back the clock, man. Even though he decisively lost that first round, Nicholas Dalby, and was actually 10-8'd on one of the judges' scorecards to mount that comeback against Bonfim. That was very impressive. But we'll also talk here about Vitor Petrino, who put Modestas Bukauskas' lights out, and I was very impressed with Vitor Petrino there. He got his wrestling going in the first round. He took it to Bukauskas. You saw a more disciplined approach from Vitor Petrino. He was getting his jab going. We haven't seen much of that in previous fights. And then that left hook in the second round that put Bukauskas' lights out. Wow. And you saw that Petrino, after the fight, in the coming days, we knew that Petrino, he's a large individual. He weighs in this morning on social media 243 pounds, I believe, which makes him bigger than Jailton Almeida, who could have come in up to 265 pounds. I believe Almeida came in at 232 or so. So Petrino already up to 243. And where does the future hold for Vitor Petrino? That is the question I have. And I saw a bunch of folks on Twitter were responding. They said that Tyson Pedro would be a solid matchup. Jimmy Crute. I saw a few others. If you have suggestions for Vitor Petrino, throw them out there. Throw them out there. Let's see. Pepe says, sickening to see all the weight misses. Yes. And Pepe, I have to say also, the situation for Rodolfo Vieira. We have to think about Rodolfo Vieira at this stage in his career. 185-pounder who has cut so much weight, and he doesn't get to fight because Petrosian gets sick. And that was a fight that I had picked Vieira there, and I know he had a short window of opportunity to come across the finish line victorious. We didn't get to see him earn his stripes there. Yes, the elder fighters did put on a number of vet lessons there. So with Rodolfo Vieira not being able to compete, where does he go from here? You have to think about prospective matchups in the future. Something I proposed was Chris Weidman taking on Rodolfo Vieira. I'd like to see that matchup come to fruition. The coffee is flowing here, and we are getting this in on a Monday afternoon. I enjoy the format. I hope you are enjoying it as well. Thank you for spending time on your Monday afternoon chatting with us. Let's see. Jared, by the way, tremendous work in the kitchen yourself, Mr. Fury. I hope you're having a good morning, Mike. Thoughts on the latest pay-per-view main event announcements? Wow. Dricus Du Plessis at UFC 297. Volk against Ilia Topuria at 298 and O'Malley Vera at 299. Now, I might be slipping here, but I have not seen that yet. I'm pulling up the announcements. Oh, wow. Here we go. 6 minutes ago, we have breaking news. Thank you, Jared, for pointing this out. Look at this. You are on to something here. Thank you, Dana, for announcing this. So, Dricus Du Plessis taking on Strickland. I love that. I love that fight. This is incredible. Thank you for turning me on to that breaking news. That is enormous. That is enormous news. And I think that Du Plessis has the ability here to come in and shock the world. I know Strickland is who he is, tremendous fighter. I was hoping that we would get Dricus Du Plessis taking on Israel Adesanya, but that did not happen. And now we get to find out who the best middleweight fighter in the world is. Looking forward to that. And Volk Ilya, now 298. Did I hear February? Is that correct when UFC 298 takes place? So it gives Volkanovski another extra month to recover from the knockout loss to Islam Makhachev. That is that's something I have on my brain. And then O'Malley Vera at 299. I'll tell you what, that should be a fantastic fight as well. You saw, all right, January, February, March, respectively. Thank you, Jared, for pointing that out. Wow. Talk about changing gears mid-podcast. This is fascinating stuff. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you my leans right off the bat. I think Dricus is live in that fight against Strickland, and he could come in and cause some problems. I know Strickland, he loves to get that jab going and stay in an opponent's face, but Du Plessis is not going to go away lightly, and he's going to empty his tank wow, that should be an incredible fight. And then as far as the Topuria-Volkanovski fight, I have some concerns for Volkanovski here. I think that this fight's happening at the wrong time for Volkanovski, and I'm leaning towards an underdog ticket cashing in that fight. And then as far as O'Malley and Vera go, I'm leaning towards the underdog in that fight too. And I think we do have fights. We do have odds for these fights. Marcus, good to see you. Hope you're having a great Monday. Hope the bookstore is doing well today. Vera at plus money. I agree wholeheartedly. So, wow, that is something else. Now, let's get back to what went down. How about Renat Fakhretdinov against Alessio Zaleski dos Santos? That was a barn burner of a fight. I tweeted during the fight that Renat Fakhretdinov was smiling. He was so confident in his abilities after dropping Zaleski dos Santos. And then the second and third round, you saw Zaleski come alive. And how many times has it been now that Zaleski has a hellacious third round with a torrid pace where he comes out looking to finish his opponent? He almost got Fakhretdinov out of there. I saw Alessio Zaleski dos Santos fight Lyman Good. I believe it was 2016. I was in the building for that one, and I saw how deep Zaleski dos Santos was able to dig in that fight, and he's done it many, many times. This is a fighter who's 36, almost 37 years of age, so impressive performance from him there. Elvis Brenner knocking out Krzyzewski with a punch that looked like it grazed his opponent. Impressive spot there by Brenner. And then you have Caio Borralho. That's another spot that was very impressive to see him march through the first round. The much larger fighter, Borralho, I know he's listed at 5'10". Hopefully the UFC will get that rectified in the near future. Abus Magomedov faltering down the stretch, running out of gas, getting hurt in the third round, and then run over basically by Borralho. But you didn't see Borralho finish there, which we'd like to see more finishing ability from Caio Borralho. Then we had the rematch that we never wanted, Rodrigo Nascimento taking on Dante Almeida. Congrats to those who went back to the well and were able to cash their Rodrigo Nascimento tickets. And Dante Almeida, that may have been the end of the road for him. And then let's talk about this is a I'd like to personally congratulate everybody who had plays on Nicholas Dalby in the fight against Gabriel Bonfim, because Bonfim, we knew he was in his mid-20s, undefeated, yet to face serious adversity, and he came out guns blazing. He was met with fire from Dalby, who had no qualms engaging in the firefight. And then Bonfim was able to put Dalby on the mat and put him in a few submission attempts, wasn't able to get the tap. And it was a very dominant first round from Gabriel Bonfim. I was impressed by the first round performance, but then you knew that there may be a wall that he was going to potentially hit. And Bonfim ended up hitting that wall. He was up on the scorecards 10-9 and then 10-8 on another scorecard. Some folks feel that that was an obscure scorecard and wasn't correct. But yes, a judge did score 10-8 for Bonfim. And you saw the second round, the beginning of the second round, Bonfim was he was continuing to perform well, and then he just hit a wall. And Dalby was not going anywhere. He was staying right in Bonfim's face, and the knees against the fence, those were the difference makers. And Dalby comes out on the other side victorious. So probably the better play during that fight was Dalby live after the first round, because you knew that Bonfim was going to give him hell that first round, and he just couldn't, Bonfim couldn't get him out of there. And Dalby, we know Jesse Ronson finished the job on Dalby. So it wasn't a sure deal that Dalby was going to come out of that first round. I know he hadn't necessarily been finished other than that Ronson fight, who was on pharmaceuticals. So Dalby comes out the other side victorious, and he does it again in Brazil. He wins the fight, and he fraud checks his opponent. Renat's striking is horrible. He was too friendly with Santos. I hate seeing fighters play buddy-buddy with their opponents during the fight. His striking is unconventional. I'll say that about Renat Fakhretdinov. He throws these winging punches. Thank you for coming on board, Glimbot. I appreciate you stepping in here. You're right. Renat can be had on the feet. It's amazing how he's been successful dropping his opponents early in the first round. And I think that's partially due to folks expecting the wrestling. They expect to be wrestled, and then here come these strikes, catching them off guard. Then we already talked about the main event of the evening. Jailton Almeida with an extremely dominant performance over Derek Lewis, where Derek Lewis was basically a grappling dummy, and he was trying not to be submitted, but he had no offense, and he could not mount any type of comeback. And Almeida was more concerned with establishing position over actually attempting a submission, because he was fearing the possibility of an explosive movement out of Derek Lewis. How many times have we seen that before, where Derek Lewis comes out and turns it on and lands that shovel uppercut? That shovel uppercut was there multiple times. I wasn't able to pull it off. So that was a fascinating card. And the biggest play of the year that I had on that entire card was on Vitor Petrino. Played him at numerous different numbers, -250, -225, -215, and -193. So it was nice to cash that. Granted, yes, did take a loss on Gabriel Bonfim. I believe we got in early before that line exploded out at -325. It ended up closing in the -600s. So I took a loss on that spot. And then we ended up hitting Caio Borralho, who, by the way, the arrow is pointed up on Caio Borralho. I want to find out who they match him up against with next, because I know he's out of the fight nerds, but he is a very intelligent fighter inside of the octagon. I love seeing fighters who make intelligent decisions inside of the octagon. So interesting night of fights we had there. Now let's talk a little UFC 295. I'll give folks some additional time to get in the chat here. I'm going to just tweet out talking UFC 295 right now. 1 second, and then we'll get right back to it. Here we go. Talking UFC 295. Okay, now let's talk some UFC 295 matchups. While we have you here, I got a number of folks in the stream, so feel free to post any questions you might have in regards to any of the matchups on UFC 295. We'll go over a number of those, and I'm going to take a swig of this coffee, and then we'll keep on chugging here. All right. Let's take a look at this card. So, Steve Erceg, we know he's coming off of a short notice victory where he defeated David Dvorak. Very impressive there. And he's taking on Alessandro Costa, it's interesting. You see two sides of Costa here. You've got the Costa that was knocked out by Almir Albazi. And then you also have the Costa who completely annihilated Jimmy Flick. And I was on Costa pretty heavily when he took on Jimmy Flick. And Jimmy Flick, I'll be honest, he's one of the lower level fighters at that weight class. And I believe Malcolm Gordon's fighting Jimmy Flick in the near future. That is, wow, what matchmaking by the UFC in that regard. So looking forward to Erceg getting back into action there. Then we have an interesting matchup. 1 second. Tim, can you let Big Pretty out of the room, please? Thank you. Big Pretty's going to come join us, folks. So we have a matchup between Tabitha Ricci and Lupita Godinez. Looking forward to that fight. You have a Lupita Godinez who has recently changed camps, and I know she is now in, I believe, Lobo Gym with another fighter on this card, Diego Lopez. Lopez, and you also have Alexa Grasso out of that camp as well. And Godinez, she's coming off of a win over Elise Reed, which in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't speak to me much. I know she completely annihilated Elise Reed, manhandled her. But you also saw Godinez get back to her wrestling, and she's going to need all of the cylinders in her motor when she takes on Tabitha Ricci, because Ricci, Baby Shark, just keeps on coming. And Ricci, she's like the little engine that could. She doesn't necessarily have great striking. We've seen her annihilated on the feet, Tabitha Ricci, and we've also seen her struggle against larger opponents. And I know this is a weird fight because you have Godinez is actually, I believe, the larger fighter here, and she has the much better striking. I like the way she throws hands, and Godinez, her striking defense has been what has cost her in a few of her fights, and also she also fought larger individuals. So this is an interesting spot where she's fighting a smaller fighter in Ricci. But Ricci, one thing I will say about her is she fights to her strengths, and she knows what her bread and butter is, and she's probably going to come out here and try to grapple heavy against Godinez, and Godinez should get the better of the striking here. My lean here is Godinez. I like Godinez to come out the other side victorious, and fascinating stuff as far as the line goes too. Oh, wait, we've got a number of comments here. The line the Godinez line, it's fluctuated. I believe she was up in the minus 180s, 190s, and you are right. Ricci does punch air and makes the Caitlin Chukagian-esque noises. She has a great motor too. So I want to see what Godinez's gas tank looks like here with her second camp out at Lobo Gym. I believe that that may be a difference maker there. We've got a question about the Castaneda Kang fight. Let's see. Hyung Ho Kang versus Castaneda. And Castaneda is coming off of a win over Muin Gafarov, which really doesn't say much. He didn't look tremendous in that fight, and I believe Gafarov was coming in on short notice. Can Castaneda's volume and wrestling overcome Kang's skills? I believe it can. I think that, let me look at the current odds on that fight here. 1 second. Here we go. So Castaneda is sitting at a minus 175 betting favorite at multiple books, and Kang is the underdog at plus 150. I believe Kang is now starting to get up there in age also. Let's see, he's 36 years old, and Kang, the Quinones fight, I mean, you watch back the tape, and Kang is a solid striker. I think he's going to be tested here. I think Castaneda can push a pace on him and come out the other side victorious. But I don't trust Castaneda's chin. I believe it was the Daniel Santos, the Wily Cat Santos fight where he was getting, yes, that second round, getting brutalized. So can Kang replicate that? I believe there's a possibility he can. Let's see. LP, welcome aboard. Thank you for coming back. I believe this is the third episode that we've done in front of the fridge here, where we're chatting about numerous matchups, covering a lot of different bases here. Let's see. Glenn bet the fight ends in a split. You think so? That might be the way to go. Thank you. See, we're giving each other some tips in the chat here. This is what I like to see. Thank you for pointing that out. Now, let's work our way up this card here. Let's get back to the UFC 295 fight card. We're talking about the first 3 fights of the night. Then we have Sadikov taking on Borshev, Slava Claus, which should be a striker's delight. But if Sadikov wants to get his wrestling going, that's a path that he could take it to. We've seen Borshev, man, when Diakese put him on the mat, he had no plan B, none. You need to have a plan B inside of the octagon, and Borshev had none. And usually when a fighter gets exploited like that, they'll go back to their team, like Team Alpha Male, and be able to come up with a game plan to march forward and win their next fight. And Borshev came out and then lost the fight against Mike Davis. So that happened. Mike Davis was holding him down and grounding him for most of that fight. And the Maheshate fight, Maheshate is not necessarily a grappler by any stretch of the imagination. So this fight should tell us a little bit more about where Slava Claus is. And Sadikov, I mean, he's the Serra-Longo fighter, is going to be in there ready to go, man. That team you talk about, Matt, the Steamroller Fravola, up and down that card, man. These kids are going to be ready to bring it to their opponents. We have also Dennis Bazooka coming in as a significant underdog against Jamal Emmers. And that should be a striker's delight. Looking forward to that one. I believe Emmers is a significant favorite here. Minus 245 at the betting window for Jamal Emmers. And you look at the way this line has moved. He opened as a minus 170 betting favorite, was bet all the way out to minus 325, and now it's come in a little bit. So Emmers down to minus 245 at the betting window. By the way, folks, we have Big Pretty in the building here. I'll bring her on screen. Lily, come here. Let's see if I can get her up here. This might be the moment of truth, my friends. I'm luring her in. I'm luring Big Pretty in here. Let's see. She's getting closer. Bear with me. Thank you for your patience. We have a Big Pretty sighting. 1 minute. Big Pretty is slowly working her way back. Pepe, thank you for thank you. Oh, you know what? Big Pretty's turned around. It looks like she's gone. I might have to leave the building to get her. Hang on. Let's see. As you can see, I'm luring her with these treats. We'll see. Let's see if it will make the podcast if she ends up here. All right. Let's continue this journey. I apologize. Thank you, Pepe. My wife picked out the backsplash there, so props to her on that one. All right, let's get back to the fights. Big Pretty may be joining us in the near future. I think she's camera shy right now. So Buzukia, I gotta say, the home turf, I think in this fight may matter here. Emmers is a very dynamic fighter, though, and we've seen him face some stiff competition, come out the other side victorious. Emmers actually dropped Pat Sabatini, and I believe he got caught in a heel hook against Sabatini, but Sabatini was rocked and on Queer Street for a few moments in that fight. And the Jack Jenkins fight, that was a split decision loss for Emmers. So interesting. He's almost 35 years old too, Emmers. I believe Emmers should be the favorite here, but Buzukia, he on Contender Series still has something to prove. I know he's got another shot here after taking the short notice bout. So interesting spot. I have no firm conviction in a play on that fight, but I believe that Buzukja has the ability to come back and cause his opponents some problems here. Let's talk about, we got Mark Madsen taking on Jared Gordon. And that is a fight that I had placed on my fridge in the background. I went up with a free play today of Jared Gordon at minus 175, and I did the homework on this fight. Mark Madsen, solid wrestler, of course, Olympic, I believe, silver medalist, somebody who is going to fight to his strengths to a certain degree, but you don't necessarily see the gas tank. You don't see weaponized cardio from Mark Madsen. You think that a wrestler has great cardio. Not Mark Madsen. He is closing in on 40 years of age. He has left Fight Ready, and I believe there were other social situations that led him to go back to Denmark, and he's been in Morocco training with Nasrat Hakparast. And so there's a lot of moving parts there. And Mark Madsen is in many, many, many close fights. You look up and down his resume here. Vince Pichel, Grant Dawson, by the way, Grant Dawson missed weight there. And that's one that you saw Grant Dawson out wrestling the Olympic wrestler and he made Mark Madsen look pedestrian. I'll say that. It was a lackluster performance, and you saw the cardio falter. You saw the durability of Madsen that came into play. He's a great front runner, and he has a great game plan, and he does his body favors in that he eats well, trains well, is 100% committed to the cause. But then you watch how he performs in the Austin Hubbard fight. Austin Hubbard almost took him out of there. That was in 2020. You watch the Clay Guida fight. That was a very, very close fight. That was a fight that Mark Madsen should have won that fight all day. And then you watch what's going on with Jared Gordon and what makes Jared Gordon who he is. That is his motor. He does have issues, though, if he gets caught. We've seen him get dropped in numerous fights. The Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, the Bobby Green fight, that was something that the clash of heads, that was a real concern. Then I believe he had a quick turnaround against Jim Miller, which that was an issue. He didn't actually make it to that fight because in media day, he talked about having a concussion and that he still took the fight and he cut a tremendous amount of weight. So thank goodness he wasn't allowed to compete that day. And then I go back to the Charles Oliveira fight. Charles Oliveira dropped him in Brazil and put him out of there really quick. So I understand the reservations from a few perspectives. Jared fight sketched me out after the Bobby and Patty. Well, the Pimblett fight, a lot of folks had Jared Gordon winning that fight. And Paddy Pimblett, we saw the aura of invincibility was gone. And I know he didn't come into that fight with an undefeated record or not even near an undefeated record. But the bottom line here is that when I did the tape back, I saw that you watch the Joe Selecki fight. You've watched many, many others where Jared Gordon can push through tough times, and he will fire it on when he meets adversity. The Hakran Diaz fight, there have been so many others throughout his career, and he's been at it for a long time. So both of these fighters are elder statesmen. Jared Gordon, I believe, is 35 years old. This is his first fight at MSG, so he's been lobbying for this fight for a very long time, and now he's got it. So looking forward to watching Jared Gordon out there. performing in front of his own home crowd. So Mark Madsen has to make the trip all the way across the pond. And granted, he's competed thousands of times in wrestling, but this isn't wrestling. And I believe that Jared Gordon's going to pull this one out. So that's one of the reasons I backed him with my hard-earned money. Then let's talk about some other fights here that are on this card. Let's see what we got here. Joshua Van versus Kevin Borjas. This is a fight that, and I enjoy watching and picking flyweight fights. Josh Van, only 22 years of age, a fighter who, it says he's 5'5", but he seems like he's shorter than that. Doesn't have a very long reach, is a striker by trade, doesn't have great head movement, but he is a very precise striker. And you talk about a fighter who has a killer instinct. This kid, Josh Van, he has that. The Ismagulov, the performance there, very impressive. Wait, hang on one second. The Zhalgas Zhumagulov fight. Yes, Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He ended up winning a split decision against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I met Zhumagulov. Not a very imposing figure. And Van also is diminutive frame. And Borjas is a pretty big, long, lanky fighter. Peruvian fighter who is also a striker by trade. So this should be an interesting fight. I don't have the best read yet on this fight. I've spent a lot of time doing homework. I've run back the tape, and Van is the initial pick, but I'm also a bit hesitant to pull the trigger on a play because 22-year-olds out here who haven't necessarily shown us who they are. They're still the jury's still out for them. And also this Borjas kid, I know this fight was initially supposed to take place on Contender Series, but I believe that there's more than meets the eye here. I think that this kid has some talent too. So looking forward to that one. And I'll be able to speak to that fight in greater detail throughout the rest of the week, but I'm leaning towards Van in that fight. Now, let's see. If you have any other questions here in the comments section, feel free to hop in. Let's talk Matt Frevola versus Benoit Saint-Denis. Benoit Saint-Denis, 12-1. And you have Matt Frevola, 11-3-1. You watch Frevola back. I was in attendance for his last fight in Newark against Drew Dober, where Dober was walking him down and looked like he was en route to winning the fight. And then Frevola floors Drew Dober. I believe it was a hook that did it. And Dober floored and finished. And I think that Dober complained about the stoppage at the time, but you saw the power. Matt Frevola, you can't count this guy out. He will keep marching forward. If you try to hold him down, he will work his way back to his feet. I learned this the hard way. Originally, I bet against him against Lando Venata, and I was in the building at Madison Square Garden when these two guys fought, and I saw the toughness and the durability and the willingness to stay in the fight for Frevola. It was like he would take 5 and then he would give 1, and then he would turn on the jets, and he had these 2nd and 3rd and 4th wins that you don't typically see out of fighters. So I know that the fans are going to be in attendance for this fight, and they will be ready to cheer on. The trumpets will be cued, no doubt. So looking forward to this one. And Benoit Saint-Denis, what blows my mind about Denis is that he is 27 years old, and he is 12-1 overall. This guy has really put it together and come into his own, and he is massive for the division. The Thiago Moises fight, he basically slow cooked Moises, and it was amazing to watch. Moises, he had I believe these fighters had a full camp. It was in Paris, and Moises got ran through very impressive from Benoit Saint-Denis. His work against the fence, closing the distance, pouring it on. I think that the cardio of each of these fighters is on the same plane. You haven't necessarily seen Frevola or Denis. You haven't seen Denis brutally knocked out. You have seen Frevola knocked out by Polo Reyes and also Terrence McKinney. And you also saw Arman Sarukian and Matt Frevola go an entire 3 rounds. So this is a fascinating fight. I am not one to count Matt Frevola out. I will say that. And I think that the odds at this stage, there is some value in Frevola here. But I also see that Benoit Saint-Denis is an extremely talented fighter, and he's getting better and better and better. And that's one thing that really stood out to me, that Benoit Saint-Denis, this guy fights like a seasoned veteran, and he's only 27 years old. So the arrow's pointed up. Really looking forward to that fight. It's earlier in the week. I'm keeping an eye on the line, and I have no play on that fight. I think that it could end up being much closer than expected, especially when you consider the judging and that it's taking place in New York. Both of these fighters are going to beat the hell out of each other for 15 minutes. Now, we're getting to the nitty-gritty here, and I'd like to finish this podcast in under an hour. So let's pick up the pace where we have Pat Sabatini taking on Diego Lopes. I was at Diego Lopez's fight against Movsar Evloev, and I was shocked how the crowd, they basically became huge fans of Diego Lopez at that moment. Those 15 minutes inside of the octagon, it was very impressive. And Pat Sabatini is going to be the closer to a hometown fighter here against Lopez. He's from, I believe, Pennsylvania. Pat Sabatini, great wrestling, great grappling, but we've seen that he can get cracked. And both of these fighters, Lopez has been finished by TKO, I believe, 2 separate times. Both of these fighters, Pat Sabatini's been finished, but Pat Sabatini's been finished more recently and by lesser strikers. We're talking Damon Jackson was able to put him out and then choke him out or ground and pound. And then you have the Jamal Emmers fight where he was dropped in that fight. Tristan Connolly too. I was big on Pat Sabatini when he made his UFC debut against Tristan Connolly. And down the stretch, that 3rd round got a little sketchy. Seemed like he was starting to run out of gas. I'm leaning towards the underdog here in Diego Lopez, and I watched back the footage of Diego Lopez, and he's a fighter who is not going to go away. We know against Gavin Tucker, he didn't go away. And the jiu-jitsu, of course, he's not going to accept position. He's going to be flying. Not necessarily. Are we going to see a flying armbar again? Is Diego Lopez going to shock everyone in the building at Madison Square Garden? I could see that happening here. It'll be an interesting fight. And I understand why the line hasn't moved much. We've seen, I believe Diego Lopez is still the underdog here. But I have a feeling look at the massive size difference here. Look at the difference in experience, in age, in the trajectory of each of these fighters' careers. And you watch about the Almeida fight. It was Mr. Sabatini who got back to his grappling roots and came out the other side victorious. So I'm leaning towards the underdog here. And don't be surprised if in the beginning of the fight, midway through the fight, and at the end of the fight, the crowd is cheering for Lopez. He has a huge, huge following. And that Gavin Tucker fight, that was something else. Then let's talk very quickly, Mackenzie Dern against Jessica Andrade. Obviously, these are fighters headed in 2 different directions. Jessica Andrade, I heard she's been making like $200,000 flat for each of these fights. If somebody could let me know if that's true or not, that's maybe the reason she's taking all these fights. After beating Lauren Murphy, she's gone on to lose to Erin Blanchfield. I was in attendance for the Yan Xiaonan fight, and I had a bet on Yan Xiaonan there. She came through Yan Jianan as an underdog and knocked out Andrade, and then Tatiana Suarez just annihilated Andrade. Now she's coming in against a solid grappler who the challenge for Mackenzie Dern is she has difficulty getting these fights to the mat. And you have to wonder if this fight doesn't hit the mat, then Mackenzie Dern could run into some real adversity because she's going to be dealing with a power puncher standing right in front of her. And I know that Mackenzie Dern is improving her striking from fight to fight, but that's an issue here that I have. I see that these fighters are headed in completely opposite directions, and I'm going to be picking Mackenzie Dern, but I need to watch a little bit more film here, and I see the numbers dropping here also. You got Dern's down to -175 here. So we're getting close to numbers that may be potentially playable, but I have concerns if Dern can't get this fight to the mat. And Andrade, we know she has some jiu-jitsu. Also, the submission of Amanda Lemos was very, very impressive. Now let's talk co-main event of the evening, I believe. Let's see. Yes, Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. This fight is, in my eyes, a coin flip fight by the fact that Aspinall, higher skilled, more potential, better ground game, but he's dealing with the Sergey Pavlovich, who is a marauder and someone who, once he starts throwing, you have to be able to show some savviness from a defensive perspective. And if you get clipped by one of Pavlovich's punches, it's a situation where you can't take 2 or 3 of those. If you do, you're unconscious. And it's difficult to fight back when you're unconscious. Pavlovich has the potential to put anybody's lights out. And knowing that he has a full camp here under his belt and that he was the backup fighter, that leaves me to believe that this is a very volatile matchup. I'm leaning towards the Aspinall side, though. I believe that although we haven't seen his cardio tested deeper into fights, and we know that Pavlovich, his cardio is sketchy, I believe that Aspinall can win this fight via submission or by knockout. And he's so light on his feet. It's pretty to watch Aspinall fight. I like what I see. I'm going to be picking Aspinall, but this is a very dangerous fight. And then the main event of the evening, where we have Yuri Prochazka taking on Alex Pereira in a fight that now has turned into the light heavyweight championship after Jamal Hill tore his Achilles. And I have a video already out here that I put out about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where I picked Prochazka and I gave out the rationale for that pick. But I also see that this fight at the main event of the evening, extremely volatile matchup. Pereira, granted, he's coming off of a win over Jan Blachowicz. He is a fighter who, Pereira, he's obviously the much more precise striker. Prochazka is a wild man in there. And I posted the video of CB Dalloway taking on Prochazka and Ryzen. Wow. What a way to go out for Dalloway. I believe that was his last professional mixed martial arts bout. He was flopping off of the ground, bouncing off of the canvas. It was incredible. So Pereira, imagine what Pereira would have done to CB Dalloway. So Pereira, 8-2 as a mixed martial artist, but we know about those kickboxing bouts and how proficient he is in there. And he could potentially land. Either of these fighters could land and put each other's lights out. I think that Prochazka, coming off of the injury, being a very unpredictable, unorthodox fighter who could come in here and shock Pereira, who's getting up there in age also. I think that is an issue too. And you look at fights that go the distance. It's been incredible. The Glover Teixeira Prochazka fight that went 5 full rounds, that Who expected that, right? Incredible stuff. So as I mentioned in a previous video, that the pick is Prochazka. I haven't made a play on the bout yet, but I've seen that now that the line is, it's headed towards a pick'em. And by the way, what was my lean early for the Jones-Stipe fight? I was on John Jones there, and that was a play that got canceled. So we'll see what happens. That fight may never come to fruition again. Let's see. We've got Yuri can bring the chaos to Alex. The only thing is, let's hope his shoulder is all good. That's a very good question, Bob the Fish. That is a good question. I'm looking forward to that bout, and I'll be putting out a tremendous amount of content throughout the week. So if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel and liking the video, that's going to be a big help here. I'll put out a bunch more videos, probably some individual matchups, also get a little bit more in depth throughout the week. And I appreciate everybody who's tuned in today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to help us out here. And it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure talking fights. So go get what's yours. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, folks. Thank you.